waking up, and I just had this idea that the president's wife, that the first lady of the United States, is in the Rose Garden. It's 5 o'clock in the morning. She's just, got a moment of quiet, finally a moment to herself. And she puts her hands in the dirt. She's a gardener, loves the moment. She smells the mulch, and she pulls out a severed arm. And I woke up with that. And my wife is like, you have the sickest dreams in my whole life. And I was like, you can say that, but I'm done working for the day. My work's done. And obviously, it's never that fully realized. Most of the time when I dream, in fact, every time I dream and write something down, I will just say, purple water saves, yes, no, yellow. And I'm like, what does that mean? I don't know. But this one I did have a severed arm being found and dug up. And I loved that it was in the White House. And that's a plot, right? That there's fiction, and I make it up. It's not real. But the very first thing that I do is I take it to the Secret Service. And I go to the Secret Service and I say, here's my fictional plot. If you had to investigate a severed arm in the White House, what would you do? And this is true. He said to me, the first thing I'd do is I would do a home renovation. I'd redecorate a room. What is that? Why? I don't even understand. He said, if I redecorate a room, I put some paint on a wall or pull wallpaper off another wall, now I can have the first family move across the street to Blair House for a couple nights. They're out of the White House. Now, I can do an investigation and the press doesn't know what I'm up to and nobody knows what I'm up to. And no one's the wiser. And I'm like, that sounds like something you've done before. And he said, think of it this way, Brad. Bill Clinton, George W. Bush, and Barack Obama have all redecorated rooms in the White House. You wouldn't believe what's been done here in the name of home renovation. And I'm like, thank you for chapter 2 and chapter 3 and chapter 4. And really, that's how it goes. I'm like, if they could do it, I asked them to write the book. I'd be, go ahead. But obviously, that's the fun to me, is you read these books, and of course it's fiction, so I don't need to get anything right. I can make everything up. That's the best part. But I love when I can put in those real details that make you go, that sounds real to me, just like that last thing I just told you. And so you'll see a scene, when I was, you'll see a scene in the book where Beecher goes to the Secret Service headquarters. It's because I went to Secret Service headquarters, and they took me into a room that's actually in the back of the building. It's a small little room, really about the size of this seating area. And there's memorabilia, it's like their museum. And there's badges, and there's old newspapers, and accounts of kind of great cases. There's a newspaper that says JFK dead. Just amazing stories. There's pictures and of Reagan's limo when he was shot. And we're talking about Reagan, and he says, the Secret Service guy says, you want to hear a really cool story? When the Secret Service says, you want to hear a cool story, yes, right? We want to hear it. So I say, of course. And he says, when Reagan was president, he sometimes used to carry a gun with him. And I'm like, there's no way that's real. And he says, it is. It was a .38. He would put it in a briefcase to hide it. He would take it on Air Force One. And my first thought was, like, wait, I have access to another president. George H.W. Bush, Sr., the dad, has helped me with a number of books. So I immediately contacted him and was like, sir, if Reagan had a gun, you must have had something really awesome. I wanted to know what he had in his pockets. And George Bush Sr., he's helped me with, I think this is my 4th book that he's helped me with. I usually send him some questions. I get back some answers. This was the first time he ever started asking me questions. And the first question was to the effect of, I want to hear more about that Reagan gun thing. Right? And you're like, yeah, me too. And he didn't know. Like, that was a new story to him, which was amazing. And I became obsessed with this. I found out that George H.W. Bush actually had his driver's license with him. That's what he used to carry. Only his driver's license, which is odd because the Secret Service, when you're president, doesn't let you drive, right? They don't want you to hurt yourself. And I'm like, why would you hold it? Is it worried that he wants to go to a bar and he's worried about being partied? Is it like, it makes no sense, but I love that that's what he had. Bill Clinton used to carry a billfold with money and with credit cards, but he also had a picture of Hillary, a picture of Chelsea, and a prayer he used to carry around. George W. Bush had a badge, an actual badge of a police officer from 9/11 who died. And his family member said, don't forget my relative, here's his badge, and he carried it with him every day in his pocket. Class act, right? I mean, love that. As class and act as Bill Clinton carrying a prayer. I love that there's a president out there doing that. I'm just always trying to be mindful of this task you're under. And Barack Obama carries famously, of course, his BlackBerry. He sometimes carried it, especially in the beginning, I should say, a little diary to jot things in. But he also has kind of a junk drawer of pockets because he If people give him a military coin or something, he saves them and carries them around. And again, full class, right? It's not junk to him. He doesn't just toss it away. Keeps some of these things and rotates them around. Doesn't always have the same one. But he also doesn't carry a wallet, which is why he's been known to say, "Where's my money?" And I just love that you can be the leader of the free world, and just like the rest of us, be like, "Where's my money? I don't even know." And it makes him sound like us, right? Sounds just like us, except for this little fact. The other thing that every president carries in their wallet, in their pockets, is a little card that they can crack that has the nuclear codes on them. I don't know if any of you carry the nuclear codes, but I don't, and that's pretty cool to me. So that's where I start. And when you see Beecher in the book, Beecher's the archivist, the main character in The President's Shadow. He's an archivist who works in the National Archives, and he's investigating this severed arm for the president. And he works for the culprit George Washington's secret spy ring that still exists to this very day, and he's the investigator. And when you see him go into Secret Service headquarters and he goes into that museum and he starts looking around, that's not Beecher reacting. That's me. That's exactly me. Everything he sees, everything he reacts to, that's me being mesmerized by this amazing museum that the Secret Service have in their headquarters. And so that's the fun to me, is that you get to read fiction, but you also get to find some facts. Other things that I became obsessed with, one of my favorites, and I have to talk about here, I don't talk about always, but I have to talk about here, is, because it's Florida related, is Abraham Lincoln's death. And for people who know me, it's one of the great cases and the great mysteries that Abraham Lincoln, of course, died by John Wilkes Booth's hands, and 12 days later supposedly died. Every history book will tell you that. What most of us forget is that there were 8 other co-conspirators who were convicted of the crime. Now, 4 of them were hanged. The other 4 were put in prison. They were supposed to get life in prison. They were supposed to go from Washington, D.C. up north to New York. I think it was in Albany was where their prison was supposed to be. And here's what really happened to them. This is true. They're pulled out of their jail cells in the middle of the night. They're thrown on a boat. The boat starts heading not north, but south. Passes the Carolinas, passes Georgia, comes to the great state of Florida, right? Now, I was in Texas yesterday. I was in Texas this morning, right? At 4 o'clock in the morning, I was in Texas. And Texas thinks they're the craziest state in the union. I see you're Texas crazy, and I raise you Florida crazy, right? We know. We live here. This is our home. I live here as my home state. No one is crazier than Florida, right? We love our state for that and hate it for that. It's the best part of Florida. And I was like, you're telling me that the people who killed Abraham Lincoln came to Florida? Of course they came to Florida. Of course they did, naturally. It's like every time I see something on the news, I'm like, I bet this crazy thing is from Florida. And they'll be like, Florida man tries to eat own wife. And you're like, of course it is. Where did zombies first come? In Florida. Where did they clone the first person? In Florida at Hollywood Beach. Like, that's where I used to scoop ice cream when I was 15 years old. I'm like, that's where you crack the code. And so they go down, but they pass Miami, the boat, and it passes Key West, and at that point they're like, there's nothing south of Key West, except there is. And there's an island, so obviously well known now, but then it was a secret island, then known as Devil's Island, also known as Fort Jefferson, of course, the dry Tortugas, for those who know. I didn't even know about it, actually, until I started researching it. And the Devil's Island was a prison. It used to hold Civil War, in the Civil War times, they turned it into a prison for deserters. When Abraham Lincoln died, it became the prison that held his killers. On this secret island in the middle of nowhere, they sat on this island. And I said, listen, I'm a good history nerd. I got to go there. And when you see, I won't ruin it, but the last 100 pages of The President's Shadow takes place on Devil's Island. And what you see there, you'll see where they stayed. You'll see the jail cell. You'll see what happened to Lincoln's killers. And you'll even see a little secret room. I didn't make it up. It's a real room that the Park Service showed me. And I love that I get to share that with you. And what I love the most is that Dr. Samuel Mudd, one of the killers of Lincoln, who was on that island, goes to the island as one of the most hated men in America. Right? He killed Abraham Lincoln, one of the co-conspirators. And so he goes there hated, but then there's an outbreak of yellow fever. And a lot of the doctors start dying. There's no one left to treat them. His name is not Samuel Mudd, it's Dr. Samuel Mudd. And he starts saving people. And on this island, instead of he goes there as the great villain and becomes the great hero. This is an island of transformation. I love that. I love that idea. That you can go to a place one person and leave a place the other. Because in a strange way, that's what we all do in the places we go. It just usually takes a longer period of time. And the reason why that really hit me is this was the first book I was writing since my parents passed away, and they were fully gone. Last book, my dad was gone, but I had already plotted the book and was in it. This was start to finish. My parents are not there, and so what do I do? And I knew when I started the book, I was like, what I want the theme of this book to kind of help me with is I want to get over the death of my parents. I got to get over it. It's been a while now. And what I realized as I wrote it, and I'm proud to say, is I don't want to get over the death of my parents. I should never, ever get over the death of my parents. For any of you who've ever lost someone, right? If you love someone with your whole heart, it leaves a hole in you. And that hole, it must be filled. And the only way to fill it is you must transform. You must transform. You may not become a better person, but you will be a different person when you lose someone who you love that much. And as I was writing this book and thinking of transformations, Dr. Mudd spoke to me there. It just did. It was a perfect idea. And usually when I write my books, I write them. I'm the writer. That's my name on the cover. And I sit there alone and, I may call my friends or I may call a wife or an editor and say, what do you think of this? What do you think of this? But I'm usually sitting there at the keyboard, nobody else there. For this book, the last line of the book, I couldn't crack it. Just couldn't crack the last line. I had the whole book down to the last page, but couldn't do the last line. For a day, I sat there just with the last line. Wanted it to be perfect. And I called my wife into the office. I was like, come up here, come brainstorm with me. Just help me out. I want to talk it out a little. And we're throwing things back and forth, and we're trying to talk it through. And finally, I'm like, no, not that, not that. Finally, blurts the last line of the book. And the last line of the book, as the words come out, my eyes well with tears. And I realize in that moment that this is not Beecher's lesson. This is the lesson for me and the loss of my parents. And I'm not one of those magical, new agey people who feels like, but this is one of those moments where art truly was magic. And I love that. I love that last line for it. If you look at any of my books, the last line and the last word is always an important word. I don't just pick it like, the tree went outside, then they went out, and then they went outside. Outside's not a strong enough word. It needs a better word than that. So the last word is always specifically picked by me to mean something. With this book, I was like, I got the perfect sentence. I don't care what the last word is. This is what it means. It's not Beecher's journey. It's my journey. And you'll see that when you read the book. I will say that, of course, in Virginia, some woman right there opened to the book to read the last. I'm like, do not read the last line first. You're going to ruin the whole book. You're going to ruin the whole book, and I'm going to kill you right here on the side. I'm like, if you open it and ruin it, I'm like, you know who lives, you know who dies, it ruins everything. But in Virginia, they don't get it. So with that said, I'll leave you with one last thing, and then we can do questions, because I love doing questions and answers. I spent last weekend, was the most surreal weekend of my life, because I got invited to, one of them I should say, to Barbara Bush's 90th birthday party. Oh. And so what they said is that Barbara Bush, it's a bipartisan event. It raises money for literacy, raised $17 million for literacy, a great cause. Nope, they did it, not me. And what they said was, they wanted to pick 4 authors. Mrs. Bush and her staff was picking 4 authors were selected to come and be the entertainment. And I said, wow, who are you going to get? And they were like, dummy, it's you. I was like, okay, I'll be there. That's awesome. Yay, team. And so my wife and I went to Kennebunkport. And we were in Kennebunkport. And at one point, we're in their house in Kennebunkport. And it's, in 2 rooms that are really, again, no bigger than a little more than this space where you're all sitting. Is George Bush and Barbara Bush, myself and my wife, Jeb Bush, W, Laura Bush. I mean, my wife was like, at what point did your life become Zelig? Like, it was just like, it was ridiculous. And the greatest part of the whole thing is at one moment, it's such close quarters, there's so few people there. This is not even the party. This was just like a special kind of like, special thing just for the guests and things like that. So it's just a couple of, maybe 60 people total in the entire place, including staff and including everyone else, and from the literacy program. And what happens is some guy smashes into my wife, just turning around too fast because we're just in close quarters. And my wife spins around, kind of almost upset, and it's W. And she's face to face with him, and I stop and I'm like, this is going to be the greatest fight of all time. Like, this is going to be an awesome one, you know? Because, like, what do you do when you get smashed into it? And so, of course, you know, no fights took place because I didn't see my wife tackled by the Secret Service. But it was a great, great experience and an amazing experience. The fun part was, and I can't tell this anywhere else, but in Florida, we got to tell this, but our governor, Jeb Bush, is there. My wife is reading the New York Times, has right there while we're sitting there. She looks, and the front page online of the New York Times says Jeb Bush has headed to Europe because he was going on his trip to kind of talk to people in Europe. And she's like, no, he's not. He's right here. And she's like, and she says, you know, Governor, it says you're in Europe. He's like, I know, I'm going after the party. And it was just one of those moments where you're like, you're watching the news here, and it's standing right here. And it was, again, just an amazing experience. And the reason I tell it to you is I know that I don't get to do that, but for you, supporting me all these years and cheering for us, and it means more than you know. So with that said, let's do some questions. And then we'll sign some books. And you can ask about anything. You can ask about TV, kids' books, anything you want. I write fiction. I'll make up an answer. You know that. You can ask about open heart surgery. I'll have an answer for it. Let's see. What other questions you have? Anyone want to be brave? And yes, sir.
On your TV shows, Decoded and Lost History, are you going to be doing season 2 of Lost History?
Yeah, question is season 2 of Lost History. We're doing season 3 of Decoded. What's happening with those? And we're talking to History Channel right now. We love doing Lost History, of course. And for those who didn't see it, Lost History is a show where we go and we find lost artifacts. Like the flag at 9/11 that the firefighters raised at Ground Zero. The flag went up and was lost, and then we go up and say, if anyone can help us find it, please tell us. Amazing show. Was their #1 news show that aired last year. Loved it. The one trick is that last month they announced, just a couple weeks ago, that the A&E, which owns History and all these networks and Lifetime, bought the Vice network. It's a new network that they're building, and so they have to take one of their networks and combine it with another. And there's H2 in History, and so H2 will no longer exist very soon. And we're obviously on H2. So we're talking about what's going to happen. You know, can we get folded in or not folded in? Should we go to another network? We obviously love the show. We love doing it, and that's our goal. And we love working with History, so our goal is, of course, to continue working with History. I'll tell you this update, though, on one of the things. For those who didn't see that last episode, and there's one little twist of it, is so the flag at 9/11 gets raised, and it's on newspaper, on the front page of newspapers. It's on a stamp. It's an amazing moment, and then the flag goes missing, and no one knows where it went. And the flag was pulled off of when they originally found that flag. It was a Greek couple. At Ground Zero had a boat, and they pulled it off the back of the boat. That's where the flag came from. And right after the show aired, our episode of Lost History on that flag aired, there was a former Marine walks into a fire station in Washington State, says, I'm not telling you my name, I can't tell you where I got it, this is the flag from 9/11, and it needs to come back now. And the fire station contacts the police department in Washington State. They contact us. They start doing forensic testing on it. And I know that, on CSI, forensic testing is done in the commercial break, and then it's really quick. In real life, it takes a little longer. And they've been doing that. The amazing part of the story is that Spiros, who's the husband and wife who owned the original flag, this Greek couple, Spiros told us that there was one marking on the flag that only he knew about. So when it came back to New York from Washington State, he could really identify it. And he never told anyone because he was like, I never want anyone to fake it. I want to make sure it's the real one. As the last episode of Lost History airs, Spiros has a stroke and dies. Oh. The amazing part of the story is that he did apparently tell someone else in the family what it was. We're now, I think the forensic testing is actually about done. The show, obviously, we're waiting to hear. I got an update last week. We're still getting updates now, so we are still searching for the items. We have tips on every item, and we still have things that are going on. And for me, whether they pay me or not, this is still my obsession, and we're still, as best we can, looking into them. So we're going to find out soon. But if you like the show, go on Twitter, go on Facebook, and tell, I forget what the History Channel hashtag is, whatever, but say, I want Decoded, I want Lost History. It's amazing. They watch it, they're like, wow, people still write about Decoded on Twitter. Maybe we should think about that show. And I'm like, it's amazing. It really is the way that they read these things and they check. So, yes, ma'am.
Since you brought that up,
Yeah.
I've always thought you'd be the perfect person about that show. Have you ever thought about researching or doing something on the Aleppo Codex?
On what is it?
Aleppo
I couldn't hear
Codex.
you.
It's the most accurate manuscript of the Hebrew Bible, and it went missing.
Okay, so it's basically, this is a question that says, if you get another show, I'm going to tell you what you should look for. I'll take anything you got. Yes, there's a codex. I actually don't know that one, which is usually I know all of them, not everything in the world, but usually they're really crazy good ones. So after when you come up, let me know what it is, or write it down on a sheet of paper so I can check it out. But yeah, no, the best thing is that in Florida, when someone recommends something, it's going to be awesome. The only place you can guarantee is there in Los Angeles. When I was in Los Angeles, someone brought me to the book signing, The Holy Grail. They brought it. Want to see the Holy Grail, Brad? You brought it all this way, sure. So this guy this is a true story, takes out this little concrete kind of pot, and he says, "Do you read Hebrew?" I say, "I actually do." He says, "Then you understand what this says." And so I take the clay pot and I look at it and I bring it close, and there are just 1,000 dots, like a pin. If you took a pin and put it into the clay and just went like this 1,000,000 times, there's no Hebrew there. And he says, "You understand now, don't you?" And I said, "I absolutely understand." Security. And so if you were looking for the regenerative powers of the Holy Grail, it is in Los Angeles on a bookshelf between Melville and Meltzer. Alphabetically right in there. Can't even make it up. You really can't. Other questions? Yes?
Any updates on your history teacher's kidney transplant?
Thank you for asking that. Updates on my history teacher's kidney. I'm going to tell you this story because some people I'm sure will not have known it. So I'm in 11th grade in Florida, and I get an amazing history teacher named Ellen Sherman, who I adore and who has faith in me, and who's one of the first teachers, beside my English teacher, Miss Spicer, who really just makes me feel like I'm cut out for school. I, of course, become a history major. I'm on the History Channel. I write books about history. I owe this woman. And what happens is I dedicate a book to her. And I hadn't seen her in years, but I was like, I need to dedicate a book to my history teacher. She did right by me when I needed her. And I dedicate the book. She reaches out to me and just to get an email from that that first person who gave you your first real job, that mentor you had in your life, just to see them come up and approach you is just magical. And we go back and forth. I'm just excited. And we're family friends. I know her son very well. We went to school together. And we go back and forth. And maybe on the third or fourth pass, she says, there's something else I wanted to ask you. I hope it doesn't make you uncomfortable, but I actually need a kidney, and I'm dying, and I see that you have like almost 100,000 people on your Facebook page. Do you think you can help me put the word out? I owe this woman. Of course I would do that. And I put out the word. And amazingly, readers like yourself start volunteering to be a match. Now we get a match, and this woman, whose name is Leslie, we'll call her Leslie, she winds up looking like she's going to be the match. And so they bring her down to Florida to do even further testing. And then I don't hear anything for a while, and I get an email from Leslie, and it says, "I just want to tell you what happened." And I go, "I don't understand what's going on." She said, when they were doing the biopsy on my own kidney to just make sure it was okay, they actually found a cancer on my kidney.
Oh, God.
And I want to thank you because they caught it so early. It saved my life. I want to thank you, Brad, for saving my life.
Jeez.
And I said, "I didn't save your life at all. You saved your life by volunteering to save my history teacher." So we wound up in Parade Magazine. I assume that's what you saw. In Parade Magazine last weekend, we put another story out there. Obviously, I had to write for Parade Magazine 2 months ago to have that story come. In the last 10 days, we finally got word, and we're not going to announce it, and it's not official yet, but it looks like we may have the match. Wow. And to me, I don't say anything and believe anything until surgery is done, and thank God it works. But we are just, fingers, toes, and everything crossed, and it's an amazing, I love that I get to do these books. If I could do that for my history teacher, that to me is, the ultimate kind of, that's better than a good review from some critic. I'll take that any day. Yes, in the back, right there, yes.
I'm a big fan out of Miami.
She says, "I'm the best."
Let's get your name correct.
Oh, you're funny. Okay, so here's the story. So, because you're out of Miami, and I know actually, did anyone listen to Paul and Young Ron in the morning? Okay, yes. So we got some listeners. Of course you do. Right. So Paul and Young Ron is the drive time show in Miami. It's in Vero Beach. It's like the #1 show. The disc jockeys in the morning that are here, and they're dear friends of mine. And about 4 years ago, I went on Good Morning America, and I'm on Good Morning America with George Stephanopoulos, and I know him. We're talking and everything, and just as we're leaving or starting, I forget even which one it was, and he says my name right. He says Brad Meltzer, Brad Meltzer, Brad Meltzer, and at one point, I think it's as we're leaving, he says, thank you, Brad Metzel. Okay, now, not a big deal. His name is Stephanopoulos, right? You cut the guy some slack, right? He's used to people getting his name wrong. It's okay. I don't care. However, Paul Castronova, my friend, who's the disc jockey here in Miami, this is the greatest day of his life, right? And so for 4 years now, every time I go on his show, he plays a sound clip that says, "Welcome, Brad Metzel." So the joke was, is I just went back and had lunch with George Stephanopoulos. We taped the thing that you can watch. If you put my name and his name in, you'll see an interview we did together that they did online. They do this thing called Burgers and some Books and Burgers. And so we go and we sit, and I'll tell you this, actually I haven't told this part of the story too, because every place I like to tell something a little different. So we go in, and all I wanted to do is get Stephanopoulos to pronounce Paul Castronova wrong. And the truth is I forgot. I just forgot, and so it's killing me, so I'm determined to go back and get it again. But he did pronounce it correctly this time. I will also say that when they sit, so now it's like, it's George Stephanopoulos, it's a big lunch, you're taping it, it's online, it's not on Good Morning America, but it's online, people are going to see it. And they put 2 burgers, they find out what you want on your burger, they put 2 burgers in front of each of us. And we're supposed to kind of talk books and eat these burgers. And I'm waiting because I'm starving. It's lunchtime. We're filming it at lunch. It's like 1 o'clock. And Stephanopoulos is not touching his burger. And I'm like, well, he's not touching his burger. I'm not touching my burger. And the interview's done, and the burgers sit there. And then he says, listen, Brad, I got to run. Thanks, so great. We say goodbye. Walks out of the room. And now there's a whole camera crew and a whole staff, and there's a burger in front of me. I'm a Jew from Florida. We don't say no to free food. So I say, I'm eating my burger. I don't care. I don't care who's here. And I start eating. And the whole crew is like, whoa, we wanted to see what you did. Everyone reacts differently, and most people are afraid to eat the burger. And I'm like, is it poisoned? So, needless to say, I ate my burger, proudly ate my burger, and convinced even one of the producers to eat Stephanopoulos' burger, because I was like, again, what did my mother teach me? Don't let food go to waste. Exactly right. So we ate the burgers.